Barbara?
No, I think she was just wrapping up. She had her summary slide when I saw her.
Just want to let you know,
Yep.
for this session, the session is going to be recorded. Okay. All the slides are going to be recorded, so it's very important to speak in this microphone.
Okay.
To have it recorded. If you need to move, we have a wireless ladder there, mic.
Okay.
So maybe if you were...
You're going to record only the audio, not
audio and PowerPoint.
Okay.
So there's no camera, but it's really the slide deck and the audio.
Is it better to?
It's for you if you prefer to be here with
I'll
the
stay
laptop.
Here
Here
it's
fine,
but I'll make sure to stay
or
here.
if you anyway, if you see that maybe after the break you prefer to walk, we have a wireless mic that we can use. So, and if people have a question, it's important that people go to the microphone to have all the session recorded.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Make sure they. Okay.
Should we get going?
I think so. It's not critical that Barbara's here.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Managing Through Recession Symposium. My name is Daniel Brosik. I'm with Hedge. I'm going to be chairing today's two sessions. Just want to make a couple of announcements for everybody's information. The first one, we are going to be recording the audio and the visual slides for most of the presentations, not all of them, and then they will be webcasted at a later date in one of the CIM or MetSoc websites. So for those speakers that have agreed to have their presentation recorded, would appreciate that you use this microphone and stay around this area to have it well recorded. As well as whoever wants to make any questions, please use that microphone at the front of the room so that we can get everything well captured. Thanks. The second announcement I want to make is we had one, we could call it last-minute addition of one very interesting presentation from Natural Resources Canada. His name is James Lauer. You will not see it right now in your booklets, but please be aware that we have an additional presentation at the end of the day, and I really recommend you stick around for that one. Our first presenter is keynote, Nathan Stubina. The title of his presentation is Next 50 Years, Mining and Metallurgy in Canada at the Crossroads, New Golden Cycle or Bust. Just want to make a special thanks to Nathan. He kindly agreed to speak for us, again, at very last minute. Unfortunately, the keynote that we had assigned for this, Mr. Paul Stothart, which you may have heard of him in different media, even from CIM magazine. He was scheduled to speak for us today. He's from the Mining Association of Canada. For a very unfortunate health issue, he had to decline. He was very enthusiastic. I just want to make an acknowledgement for his keenness on participating. And thanks again for Nathan to taking the challenge of putting together something very quickly for us. Nathan?
Thank you very much. Before I forget, I'd just like to put in a plug for the management section. It's really a one or two man show. It's Daniel. There used to be Dan Ashman. I believe before that Michael King was involved. And a lot of people, when they attend these conferences or they tick off what society they're interested in, they'll pick a hydro or pyro or mineral processing. But very few people will pick management as their first choice, and it's the same as environment. I see Jana's Zink here. So these are usually very interesting sessions. Over the years, I've always tried to go to a few of the management ones. Usually it's a one-day event out of the 3-day program, and as you could tell, a lot of people are interested in the topic. So Daniel would certainly appreciate a lot of help in organizing it. He doesn't have dozens of people to rely on, not a lot of funding, but it is, as you've heard from the keynote this morning from Barbara, and hopefully the talk I give today, that it's a very valuable topic and very interesting. So if anyone's interested in helping with Daniel, I'm sure he would appreciate the help. Or am I putting words in your mouth? No, okay. When I was putting together the talk, I came across this new word, or it's a new word to me anyways, quinquagenary. I thought it was quinquagenary, but it's quinquagenary. And as you probably guess, it means 50th. So it could be your 50th birthday, 50th anniversary, anything to do with 50. So the new word, if you use it 3, 4, 5 times today, it'll be yours. As we saw yesterday, it was the unveiling of the new book. And when I was putting together the slides, I relied very heavily on this one here. There's a lot of interesting quotes there, a lot of hard work from the authors. Some of them I see in the room here. So everyone, as you know, who attends this conference will be getting a copy mailed to them. And it's 600 pages. We didn't want you to carry 20 pounds home in your luggage or on the plane, so I hope you appreciate that. But I found it very interesting. I learned lots of new things by putting this together. So the authors of this paper are essentially the co-editors of this book. So we have Joël Kapusta, who you saw last night as our MC, Phillip Mackey, if you want to just raise your hand. Phillip's in the first row here, and myself. And as you saw, there's 59 other authors that went into putting this book together, so it's really a labor of love. The sources for this paper come from many places. The book, as I mentioned, NAMAC, which stands for the North American Extractive Metallurgy Council, and this is a collaboration between TMS, SME, and MetSoc CIM. And what we're trying to do is collaborate as much as possible so you don't have 2 nickel conferences in the same year or 2, of the same theme. So we try to co-program as much as possible, and if not, we collaborate on different topics. Then there's a survey that we sent out for the book and also for next year's conference in Niagara Falls, which there were 90 surveys sent out. We received about half of them back, which is pretty good for a survey, so we're going to rely on that. And then as well as different entities, the CIM, of course, MIR, which just gave the plenary, Mining Innovation Research, Human Resource, MAC, Mining Association of Canada, Prospectors and Development Association of Canada, the Mining Innovation Council, and there's a paper by Deloitte which follows mine, but I took a few quotes for there, so I don't want to steal their thunder, so I'll just briefly refer to that. And if I couldn't find anything that supported my hypothesis, I just kind of made it up on the spot. So this is the 3rd time at this conference that we're going to invoke the god Janus. We saw it on the chain for Caesar. We saw it in the plenary by Fatih Abashi. And I think this is a great one. So in ancient Roman religion, mythology, Janus is the god of the beginnings and transitions. One face looks east and one face looks west. And symbolically, it's looking into back into the past and into the future. And I think Joël summed it up pretty good yesterday. Learn from the past, live in the present, but prepare and plan for the future. So before this paper, I saw this in Fatty's paper for the book, and now it seems like it's a common theme. So this is the 3rd time in a couple of days. In these matters, the only certainty is that nothing is certain, which goes back quite a way, as you can see from the quote there. So we're going to talk a little bit about the past, and we're going to try to make some predictions into the future in this talk. This is an actual cover from the Business Week in December of 1984, and it blared out "The Death of Mining." Now, it was specifically, for the United States, specifically for the copper industry, but we're really hoping that the next 50 years, the press won't be as bad as this one here. This is from a Journal of Metals just a few years ago by Michael King, And he was looking back at 50 years of extractive metallurgy, essentially in the United States, and it was the evolution of technology for extractive metallurgy over the last 50 years is the best yet to come. So we have a very pessimistic one from 1980s, and this one is a little bit more optimistic. And hopefully in 50 years we'll be talking about mining on the moon or some other planet to get our resources. Thought I'd leave you with 3 quotes here. I never think of the future, it comes soon enough. Albert Einstein. The future will be better tomorrow. Dan Quayle. The future ain't what it used to be. Yogi Berra. I don't know if these are a decreasing order of IQ, but I just picked, as I just saw that as I was speaking, but I thought they're pretty good quotes. As I said, I don't want to steal the thunder from the next speaker, so I'm just going to briefly look at their trends. And when I read this paper, which I have a copy in front of me, I thought this was really, really well written and had some interesting points. So for them, the 10 trends were financing, supply can't match demand, social license, which we've heard a lot about in the last couple of days, new regulations, invest strategically, a lost generation. Again, we've heard a lot about this, and the last plenary was talking about that one. End of the rainbow, a tough environment, working with no backbone, and rethinking industry fundamentals. And I'll briefly comment on a few of these as we go through, but like I said, our next speaker will cover these in a lot more depth than I will. Financing, this is an interesting quote. This was specifically about the United States. So it says, the proper development of the mining industry requires capital. Like it or not, the internal sources of money in Canada are just not sufficient. Some foreign investment is absolutely necessary. In our reaction to the extent of American investment in our country, we tend to lose sight of the fact that this foreign capital is essential to us. And this was, goes back several decades, and at that point, American financing was critical for the Canadian mining industry. But if you look at the landscape today, it's very different. We have sovereign funds. We have China, Minmetals, trying to buy into our natural resources. South Korea has funds. Japan has funds. So the landscape has really changed a lot in the last several decades. This is an interesting graph. We saw one yesterday with a different metal. And this one is refined copper usage per capita. And what we have on the y-axis is the consumption usage per capita, kilograms per person, and on the x-axis is the GDP per person. So, just to point out a few, if you have India back down here, very low consumption, very low GDP, and here you have Canada, about 40 to 50,000 range, and in the 5. And I still have yet to figure out why Belgium uses so much copper. I'm not quite sure. If somebody could explain that, that's fine. But I don't think all the countries are moving up into this direction. Here you have Germany, high capital, high GDP and high usage. So, if you just can imagine if India is moving along this direction and goes from 0.1 to 5 or 10, the amount of copper that will take, also China here, is fairly high on this range here, but we learned, all the construction going on. Chris Twigg-Molesey, talked about all the, the cities and the electrical infrastructure that will be needed in the next few years. So you can just imagine all these countries here moving up here, how much copper, and this goes for a lot of other metals, of course, zinc and nickel and whatnot. I found this one very interesting too. I'm from the gold industry, so I picked this graph. It came from a professor, Gavin Mudd, who gave a paper several years ago at one of our conferences. But what it shows is the gold grade, grams per ton, over the years, back to 1835. And I think a lot of you have used this slide or have seen it before. But we used to be up here, 20, even a little bit higher. But now we heard at the gold plenary yesterday that we're down to the 1 gram per ton range. So this is not just financial. This will affect a lot of things: environmental, energy, water usage, and so forth. So over the years we're down, and now most of the mines, at least in my company, we're talking 1-2 grams per ton versus the ones up here. In fact, it pays to go back and look at the tailings from these operations, which are much higher than the ore coming in from these years. This was from the Deloitte paper. I just plagiarized a quote. Local communities have heightened expectations from today's mining companies. To avert potential crises and protect their investments, it is essential for companies to build strong bonds with both central and regional governments and local communities. And I think we know that in our industry, you know, we build roads, we build hospitals, we build schools, and this will continue, plus more and more and more. There's really the social license, the things that are the government, not the government, the mining companies are expected to do, and the local communities will get more and more as we go to more remote locations. Everywhere that Barrick goes these days, there's no grid. We're a mining company, but yet we have to build 100 megawatt, 200 megawatt power plants. Where we go, there are no roads, there are no schools, so it's not just the mining. People think of us as mining companies, but the amount of civil engineers, the amount of mechanical engineers, the amount of electrical engineers that we need is staggering. And when you go to these schools, these students don't even think of going into the mining industry, and that's something we have to really change. I think we've seen this a few times again, but if you haven't seen it from Barbara's presentation this morning, this is the age distribution of mining workforce versus all industries. So if you particularly look at the right side of your screen, you know, the 45 to 54 range, the 55 to 64 range, you know, you've got 35% here, another, you know, 15% here. So you've got, you know, half the workforce that's eligible to retire, thinking about retiring, can retire, and not too much in this range. Well, we don't want too many 15-year-olds in our industry, but you know, this group here, we're doing a little bit less than all industries, and you know, that's something we're really going to have to target. This is from the NAMAX survey, the one we sent out to TMS, SME, AIST, and of course MetSoc and CIM members. And there were 318 responses, and this mimics the graph that you just saw a second ago. So again, you know, we're very skewed to this here. I guess there's a couple of people that preferred not to answer, but you know, we're definitely skewed to the right, and that's something that's going to have to be addressed as we go forward. I go to schools very often. I go to engineering schools across the country. I try to convince people to go into mining, metallurgy, materials. And when you bring up the word metallurgy, this is what they think of. Some guy with a pickaxe on a donkey, some guy panning for gold. You know, Barrick made 8 million ounces of gold last year, and none of it was made this way here. So this is, I'm going to talk about this in a couple of minutes, but this is one perception that we really have to change. It is a high-tech industry. We need people to be passionate about it. We heard over the last few days, you know, we have a lot of successes. We have to really promote those, as opposed to a lot of the bad press. You know, Barrick got some bad press on Friday in the Globe and Mail. And, you know, we have to really promote the industry as something desirable to go into. I don't know how many people in the room have been to the CIM AGM, but as part of the AGM, there's something called M4S, which is Mining, Metals, Materials, and Minerals for Society. And there's 7,000 students that are brought in to touch and to look at what our industry is about. 7,000 students. We don't run out of students, we run out of buses. There are students on the waiting list, and as you could see from their faces, you know, they're doing, you know, exciting things. They're driving trucks, and they're looking at metals and bicycles and high-tech shape memory alloys, and it's quite an exciting event. If you get a chance to go to it, you'll be quite impressed. If you get a chance to participate or to volunteer your time, it'll really be worthwhile. It's a great event. A little bit of statistics. Barbara, you know, showed some of these, and you know, I'm sure she'll reinforce that later. So, you know, look at this. I guess the general population is like 50-50 male-female or something close to that. And look, you know, we attract, you know, 12 to 14% of women into our industry. This is one area we really have to work hard on. Here you have Aboriginal, immigrants, and visible minorities. In Canada, visible minorities are about 1 in 6, 16%, something like that. So we're well underrepresented in these areas here. Aboriginals, you could see there's a big difference between mining and processing. which to me means that a lot of the lower paying jobs, maybe drivers and so on, are attracted into this industry, but we do a very poor job of attracting Aboriginals into the higher paying or higher technical areas of our processing industries. Same with immigrants. Canada, again, I think it's around 15–20%, and we're quite low in some areas. Three main points here. I think we've covered a lot of these. An aging workforce, as we know, over 50% of the workers as a group represent an area that can retire or thinking about retiring. This is an interesting statistic here. Employers predict that about 1/4 of their workforce will retire in 10 years, but 40% of employees surveyed think they might be planning to retire. So there's a little disconnect there. And then, as I mentioned before, non-traditional groups, women, if you consider that non-traditional, maybe in our industry, not so much in this room here, but this is an area we can really work on. Aboriginals, visible minorities, so we really have to attract people into this industry. This is from a slide that John Pesey, Professor Pesey, who was originally I worked with him at Noranda. He worked at Hatch, and now he's a professor at Queen's University. He gave a talk at the similar conference in Sudbury a couple of years ago. And first one's obvious: mining industry is highly cyclical. We go from periods of very high demand to low demand. This is an interesting one. Student enrollment at Queen's, and I think it's across the country, really follows that roller coaster. The fourth point is important. All stakeholders are aware of this issue, but despite many initiatives by industry, university, governments, nothing has changed this pattern. It's really important that we get out there, we hire some summer students. The last thing you want is someone to graduate from a 4-year engineering program, never have seen a ball mill, a tank house, a smelter, whatever industry you're in. And it's great to have summer jobs working in the labs of the university, but it's really important to get the students out there. And no matter how bad times are, Professor Pesey was saying, put aside $3,000–4,000 a month, hire a student for 4 months, 8 months, and get them out into the industry. And I think I see this at the conference. We have 150 students here. They come here, they meet the people, they see they're not the only ones in their field. Hopefully they'll come back to a COM. Hopefully they'll be interested in this industry and continue with that. So, this was a good point. He made it 3 years ago. I've heard it, 20 years ago, and hopefully we won't hear it again in the next 50 years. As mining companies struggle to respond to mounting environmental challenges, one thing's for certain: lowering your standards is not an option. Another Deloitte quote. This one's quite long, but I don't expect to read every word here. The point is, this was given by Professor Kellogg in 1978, when environmental issues weren't really part of the conferences. It wasn't really part of our vocabulary. But what he was saying is, we face real identifiable risks to life and well-being, both inside and outside our factories. The last sentence is quite interesting. Gone are the simpler days of 1900, when the earth, the air, and the water served as convenient sewers, with danger only to a minor fraction of the population. And that goes back to 78. Similar quote here. This was, again, by Professor Kellogg. And he was giving a speech in the 70s, so the urgent need for conservation of natural resources obliges the metal industry to adopt processes designed that use less energy, less capital investment, and protects the environment and the health of the workers. And this might seem obvious today, but this was really earth-shattering at the time. This is another graph from Professor Mudd, and it kind of goes with the one I showed before with the ore grades. So just as you saw as the grades of gold, and this applies to any metal, copper, nickel, whatever, the gold grade is declining in this direction, and this one just happens to be the amount of cyanide used of gold produced, so kilograms of cyanide per kilogram of gold. And this applies for the amount of energy, the amount of water, the amount of anything to produce a kilogram or an ounce of gold. So the old days, you were down here. But now as you go to 1 gram per ton, you're exponentially ballooning off into this direction here. So unless we change something with energy, with water uses, with cyanide uses, we're going to be using more and more and more of all these things to produce the same amount of gold. This one here was from the survey that I mentioned we sent out for the commemorative book. And the question was just looking at energy use, say energy units per ton of metal, and desirable improvements from that, and what kind of reduction in energy do the people think we'll get or will need going forward in the future. So a full 2/3 of the respondents say we're going to get 67%. 67% say we need a 25% reduction, and then a good chunk thought we would need a 50% reduction, and then some at 10%, and there was one person that gave a not applicable response. That means that we gave them 3 choices, 10, 25, and 50, but they picked something else. So now, if you look at the industry, this chart is another interesting one. Excavation, material transfer, mine operations, and mineral preparation, separation here. So a full 50% of all the energy used goes into mineral preparation, the comminution, the crushing, the grinding, and so forth. And I don't want to pick on these people, but I just want to make a few points. This goes back to 1900 to pretty much the present. I'm not predicting the future, it's just one of these Excel things. So back here we had the ball mill. So the ball mill's been around 100 years or more. So, these are mill diameter in meters, so we were, 1 point something. And we made great strides. We can make ball mills bigger than the size of this room, a lot bigger than this room. And then, we have the SAG mill and AG mills coming in, which, again, are great improvements. And we've got this, I think this one was a 42-foot, 12 point something, 13 point something diameter mill. Now, I don't know if you know much about the ball mill, but if you had to take something and invent the most inefficient way of breaking rocks, that would be the ball mill. What is it, 1%, 2% of the energy actually goes into something useful. The rest is noise and heat and so forth. So, we've gotten quite good at making big ball mills and big ag mills, but if somebody wants a 25% reduction in energy or a 50% reduction in energy, making bigger and bigger ball mills is really not the way to go. And like I said, I don't want to pick on this industry. They made great improvements. If you go back to 1988, kilowatts 4,000 up till 14,000 plus today, and they've had to make it's from single drives to twin drives to gearless drives. So, in this area, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, these are amazing improvements, and going from 1.2 to 6 times higher. And if you look at the SAG and AG mills, going from 3 to 12, quadrupling. These are great improvements, but not from what you've looked at the survey and what we need in terms of energy and water and so forth. Now, in the old days, you had the choice of the ball mill, and now if you're trying to get finer and finer grinding, you can bring in vertical mills and stirred mills, and you do make improvements. So and also as the ore gets lower and lower in grade, grinding in this area here is not good enough. People have to get down to the 1 to the 10, and if you just use a ball mill, you'd be ballooning to like 1,000 kilowatt hours per ton, and you physically realistically can't afford to spend that much money. So there have been great improvements. So instead of being way up here, you're down here. So yes, there have been a lot of improvements in the area of crushing and grinding, but more are needed. That's my main point. This one here there's a company called Selfrag, and there's one in Canada with Louis Cabri called CNT, and I put these here so you could look them up. But what they do is they use electric pulse disaggregation, EPD, which breaks up the rocks using pulse waves. So it's a lot different than a ball mill, totally different mechanism. And just, we don't have to go through it in great detail, but the main point is, instead of applying crushing grinding, so they're looking at the bond work index after EPD. So here you have the amount that you're adding by zapping it, which is just a couple of kilowatt hours per ton, and the overall reduction could be 20%. Some ore is very little, but some ore is 24%. So these are the type of things that we have to be looking at in the future, and as opposed to just building bigger and bigger ball mills. Again, I stole this one from the Deloitte paper. I don't think they'll go into as much detail, so I just want to make a couple of points. It's, I mentioned it a bit before about the infrastructure, and I said, everywhere Barrick goes, we have to build roads, we build schools, we build airports. So, just a couple of quotes. The American Society for Civil Engineers, $2.2 trillion gap between where we are, supply and demand for roads, bridges, water, infrastructure, public transport. Australia, $3.9 trillion investment by 2050. India, ports upgrades, $500 billion by 2012. That's just in the next year. And then, going forward, it's much, much bigger numbers. Globally, $6 trillion required in infrastructure investment over the next 3 years, and 80% of that from the BRIC countries, specifically Brazil, Russia, India, China, of course others, but 80% of $6 trillion in infrastructure is just a staggering number. This one, anyone involved in R&D knows this pendulum. Either the R&D center is working 100% on today's problems, or they're working 100% on the next 10, 5, 50-year problems. And every once in a while, somebody comes along and says, well, what are these people doing? And the pendulum swings, or the place gets shut down, and it goes back and forth. So we can focus on core competencies, which of course are important, or we can be open to new ideas, which again are important. And whatever your belief system is, you're going somewhere back and forth on this pendulum. This quote was given yesterday, so I stole it and stuck it into my presentation. Tony gave it during the innovation, one of the first papers in innovation. To be innovative, you must be prepared to destroy the processes that you love. So if you love the ball mill, you have to be prepared to destroy it. If you love whatever process, you have to be able to think maybe there's something better. This was another quote I like. This was from the CMIC, Canadian Mining Innovation Council. Research is the transformation of money into knowledge. I'll repeat that one. Research is the transformation of money into knowledge. Innovation and imagination are the transformation of knowledge into money. So you have the idea, the invention, that's the spark, that's just great, that's a great idea. Innovation is bringing it forward, making sure everybody has one, everyone buys one, everybody wants one, and that's how you're going to make the money out of this thing. Of course, they're both important, but I thought that was a very good quote. When I was making the slides, I opened up the Globe and Mail, and there was a big picture of canola, and I thought that was an interesting one. Canola, Canada Oil Low Acid, that's what canola stands for. And in the 1970s, there was no canola, so it's only a few decades ago. So scientists took rapeseed, which was just used as an industrial lubricant. They blocked the inedible acid, so it was now fit for human consumption, and it also turned out to be low levels of saturated fat. In 1990s, there was another change. They genetically modified the seed to make it tolerant to herbicides. And in 2010, it's a $5.6 billion in farm sales. It's the most valuable cash crop. It's eclipsed wheat, which is 3.5. And if you include everything, transport, processing, and so forth, it's a $15.4 billion industry. So in just a few decades, it went from like some idea to great swaths of land in the prairies being devoted to canola. This is another interesting quote. 1962, the first conference of metallurgists. John Convey, who happened to be the chair of this branch, but he was the first chairman. The first conference of metallurgists was a success because of its contribution to the promotion of research consciousness. Unless we are concerned with research, the country will falter. Another quote, 1959, International Nickel. It didn't just grow by topsy-turvy. It required research and development. Caminco, many years of research in attaining its status. Sherritt Gordon, success is attributed chiefly to technical developments. The gold producers should also be classed with these developments. Research developments in the past and the future holds a much larger scope for the talents of the developers. And the authors concluded, to maintain the rate of increase, a greater share of development must come from technological research, 1959. So as we know what's happened, there's been a lot of mergers, acquisitions in the mining industry, and as a result, most domestic mining houses have largely done away with in-house research and development, and many are reluctant to invest in technology development for which there is no immediate need. So we've seen over the years, Noranda research centers closed down, Xstrata research centers essentially, external projects, and so forth and so forth. So, can we get away too long with this type of model? Well, we'll see in 50 years. This one here, flotation. I seem to be picking on the mineral processors. That wasn't really my intent. The first flotation patent was issued in 1860. The first commercial development was in Broken Hill, BHP now, 1904. So we've done quite well. We've gone from 1 meter cubed all the way up here. You can buy ones at 350. Maybe if you talk to the Udotech guys, they have bigger ones on the design board, which is, this is quite an amazing accomplishment. But I'd say it's a very conservative industry. We don't quickly embrace other type of technologies. Maybe we should look out of our industry to see what else is there and see what can be brought into to mining metallurgy. This was another question from the survey. To make Canada more competitive in the future will mean committing more effort than at present by both industry and government to research and technology in mining and metallurgy. 71% strongly agreed with this statement, and 22% mildly agreed. So this was the most definitive survey question. So 90% of the people who answered this felt very strongly of this type of question. This is the amount of R&D going into mining, primary metals, fabricated metals, non-metals, and so forth. So it tends to be about the $500 million range for Canada. If you look at what Australia spent, that's $5.3 billion in the same time frame out of about $52 billion in mining investment. So whatever criteria you want to look at it, however this was defined, it's a 10-to-1 ratio between Canada and Australia, both very strong mineral countries. This one I found, this is some work that I've been involved with. These are just 3 rocks here, and what you could do is you could see the same thing here. You could heat them up. You could look at them with x-rays and so forth. So this one here is barren. You could see it barely shows up on the screen. This one here, you could see by heating something up, let's say it's a sulfide, in microwaves, it'll show up, and then by ore sorting, you can detect it. By looking at the color, you wouldn't really know if there's any sulfides in it or not. Here it's barren, here there's a lot at the top. So these are the type of techniques that we have to spend on. Here's an ore sorting machine. As fast as the eye could see, here's a rock falling, here's a rock falling, here's a rock. You zap it, and the processing is so fast that it'll decide if there's anything worthwhile or enough of the worthwhile material. So it'll just kick it back, forth, and you end up with a pile of either white-black, which is easy sorting, or containing gold or whatever metal sulfides in the pile. So these are the type of techniques. Instead of treating 100% of the material through the milling and the crushing circuit, we can only treat the stuff that has any value to us. The present-day mineral industry, with few notable exceptions, can hardly scrape together the funds needed to support industrial and academic research. As a result, most centers of excellence on extractive metallurgy have been shut down or changed their names and goals to loftier subjects such as advanced materials or the like. This was from 1993, but it was really, summarizing 1950 to whatever. So it was an interesting quote, and this is one thing I'm quite interested in. What's in a name? So when we did the survey, we asked people what type of name do they associate themselves with. My degree is from McGill. It was in metallurgical engineering. I have no problem being a metallurgist, but there's not one university department in Canada that has metallurgy in its name. They've all changed to materials or something loftier. So the people in industry, this was a wide age group. So some were mineral processing, a good chunk were extractive metallurgy, extractive metallurgists, material scientists, metallurgy, and so forth. So, the debate goes on, what does a metallurgist do? What's a material scientist? So I was told that when you talk to the younger generation, and there's a few in the room, you could ask them at the coffee break, what does it mean to you, in metallurgy? And I heard metallurgy is synonymous with belching smokestacks, or this type of operation, whereas material science is more, high tech. And I don't know if we have to change that perception or not, but when you say the word hydrometallurgist or pyrometallurgist, I don't, think of that. I think, a little bit more high tech. So I think it's something we have to do to promote what it is to be a metallurgist. This one here is from the CMIC, the Canadian Mining Innovation Council. There is R&D work going on in Canada, and the mandate of these people is really to see what should we focus on, how do we pool our resources instead of, each one going separately. So, it's a very new entity. They'll be holding a meeting, during this conference here. So it's really to look at, mining and education and R&D centers. And what they focused on are 6 major initiatives: exploration, energy, mining, tailings, processing, green mining, and all of these different things are different areas of advancement. So if you're interested in this topic, I would check out their website, see what they're doing, volunteer your time, give your opinion, because they're trying to really promote a lot of the things that I've been talking about so far. A little bit about the future now. Since it's almost Thanksgiving, I thought we'd all imagine we were turkeys. Okay. So the quote says, it's naive to project too many things on the future based on the past. So let's say you were a turkey and you plotted your weight. So the first 1,000 days of your life, you're plotting your weight and everything's fine. And if you try to extrapolate that too far into the future, but you know what happens on the 1,000th day of a turkey's life? Yeah. Prediction is very difficult, especially if it's about the future. Niels Bohr. I picked it because it was 1962. That's when he died, and that's when our first conference was. So imagine if you were sitting at the conference like you are now in 1962, and the gold price was $35 an ounce. And in fact, in those years, it was illegal for Americans to own gold, either at home or anywhere in the world. And you came back for 10 years, and it was $35 every year. What price would you have predicted today? As you know, it touched $1,900 last month, but it's come down a little bit. But what would you have thought about the future price of gold based on your limited knowledge at this point here? Same as I guess the turkey situation. So this is the survey we sent out to the people for this conference, and we asked them to characterize the Canadian mining industry. And you can group some numbers together. So you could see some are negative, some are positive. For example, challenged, probably negative, foreign, probably neither, successful, positive, dynamic, and so forth down the road. So, kind of gave us a little snapshot of what people were thinking about the present. So where are we today? Canada, number 1 in uranium, number 1 in potash, 2 in nickel, but very close to the Russians. This is in mine production. Cobalt, again, right up there. Titanium, 3rd. Platinum group metals, aluminum here, and then diamonds, precious metals. And, it's an interesting chart. It goes up and down over the years. I like this one here. What top 10 issues will mining companies be faced in 50 years? Environmental concerns, pretty much unanimous. Manpower availability, which is some of the things Barbara was talking about. Energy concerns, things I mentioned, political concerns, social concerns, and down through the list. So, I think this really reinforced a lot of the data we saw from Deloitte's work and from the Mining Association of Canada and so far down the list. Over 50 years, what's the impact of mining and metallurgy on the economy of Canada? So do you strongly agree? You mildly agree? So it's kind of split. 41% mildly agree that the impact of mining and metallurgy will be greater than it is today. So obviously we're going to have to continue along the path and make improvements. Oops. Will Canada be an influential member of the G8 group in 50 years? So again, mildly agree, about half the people, some neutrals. What should the organizers of these conferences do to maintain the present type of event? Increase participation, increase global appeal, focus on technology and development, not as clear-cut. Will we have to merge? Will the Conference of Metallurgists have to merge with another conference? So again, mildly agree, 21, strongly agree, so about 50-50 think we'll have to be merging with somebody else. What about MetSoc of CIM? Not the conference, but the Society MetSoc of CIM. And again, similar here, not as strong, you have a lot of neutrals, but 29% mildly agree with that statement. The people who attend, the people in this room, tend to be highly industrial oriented, but the good part from academia and students, so if you add these together, it's quite high, and then so far down the list. I like this one here. How many conferences do you typically attend a year? So, one, maybe two. So I think we have to stop with these standalone events. I would rather have these bigger conferences where, if you're interested, in management or environment or whatever, you could have it all in the same building, and then you kind of run between room and room, as opposed to having just a conference on one particular topic, and you might get 100 people there. This way, you have better networking opportunities, and people can't get the money to go to 5 conferences like they did, in the older days. How many conferences in North America do you attend? Outside of North America. So a good chunk don't get outside North America. Lucky few get to go to 1, 2. Couple of people get to go to 3. So we really have to be targeted with our choices. If we have collaboration with European or South American organizations, we have to make sure it's a blowout event, easy to get funding from your boss to go to these, and we can't have, going to all over the world, for many, many conferences. So we could learn a lot from that. Who pays your registration fee? If you're not getting paid by your employer, statistics say maybe you should go talk to them. 66% do. What are your thoughts concerning the quantity of conferences in extractive metallurgy? So good chunk say just about right, a few not enough, a few too much. Again, we won't read everything here. So despite the anxieties of Canadians, the mining industry grew through the 60s and 70s. Most of the large Canadian companies during this period could boast significant metallurgical advances that they themselves had pioneered. And a lot of this will be covered in the book, so I suggest you take a look at the book. So, this was what I was referring to, the golden age of metallurgy that Michael King in the Journal of Metals a paper wrote about. So there's a lot of innovations. But if you look back over the years, a lot of the innovations came from the mining companies themselves. Pyrrhotite rejection in Sudbury, slag cleaning from the Falconbridge Technology Center, pressure oxidation for gold, so forth, down and the road. But if we have fewer and fewer of these type of institutions, these type of labs, where will the next generation, where will the next improvements, where will this 50% reduction in energy come from? I like the dreams of the future better than the history of the past. Thomas Jefferson. So I just have one last slide. This is the book. And I was thinking back, 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis. John Glenn becomes the first American to achieve Earth orbit. Telstar becomes the first communications satellite intended for regular service for television signals between North America and Europe. Marilyn Monroe died. She was a strong metallurgist. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? One Flew Over the Cuckoo Nest. And I'm from Montreal, so I thought I'd throw this one in. Toronto Maple Leafs win the Stanley Cup. Thank you for your attention.
Any questions for Nathan at this moment? Nope.
Nathan, congratulations. It was an excellent piece of collection of all these thoughts and ideas and quotes from the past. Of course, the future remains fuzzy and murky. We don't know what's going to happen. And of course, I saw you that you touch R&D, because after all, Canada is G8 country. Mining is global. Here, we should develop, and we continue the tradition that we have with technology development and exporting that technology, the know-how, and so on. So we need more investment in R&D. But then I come to the university role, because after all, I'm in academia, I have to defend my kind. You mentioned that the word metallurgy does not exist anymore. The students are not exposed to that. Mm-hmm. It's exposed by in some curricula, because some professors like me, they're still around, they teach and so on. But all the new academics hired, at least at McGill, well, there are some exceptions, but the trend I'm talking is advanced materials. And my new colleagues are not here. MetSoc is not their home that they are looking to build their career. They think that there are other societies more relevant. So the role of the universities and the education and how we can build this pool of talent for the future. And yes, we have students and we're happy and so on. And McGill yesterday won the best student chapter. But I know the struggle that they go through. And a few years back, that chapter was basically demolished, and there were a few new energetic students who started. So it's very roller coaster and so on. Nothing looks healthy to me like when you and I were graduate students at McGill. So we need really, for the future, to think more about the universities that they generate the talent, and then success will come, because it comes from the people with good ideas, competent, enthusiastic about what they are doing. And we're proud and we continue. So I'm very happy that you prepare all this and makes us all think about it, and we should do it more often, not to wait another 50 years or so. Thank you.
Any other questions for Nathan? We had a couple of extra minutes, if you wish. If there are no more questions, then I would like to thank Nathan for an excellent presentation on behalf of the Metallurgical Society. Nathan, thanks a lot. Here's a gift.
So please sign up. Daniel needs help organizing these for next year and the year after that. If you're passionate about this, this type of topic, please talk to Daniel. Thank you. Thanks.
Our next presentation is at 10:35, so in about 7 minutes we'll reconvene here. Thank you.